Together with Italy, the leading region of Europe for the production of paintings during the 15th century was an area that roughly coincides with modern-day Belgium. Several of the greatest painters of the 15th century worked there. We will study two of them in this course, Jan van Eyck and Roger van der Weyden. We can use this image on the screen to describe the main characteristics of Netherlandish painting. It shows part of a picture by Van Eyck that shows a man named Arnolfini. It is in the National Gallery in London. It was painted in 1434. Like their Italian counterparts, Netherlandish artists from the beginning of the 15th century wanted to be more realistic than their medieval predecessors. This is what made them modern. Instead of emphasizing the illusion of depth through the use of linear perspective, as had happened in the early Renaissance in Italy, they emphasized the careful rendition of details in the objects and the materials that they included in their paintings. Look here, for example, at the lamp and at the mirror. This realism in the details is very effective in creating the illusion that what we see is real. The will to represent things in a way that looks realistic coexisted in Netherlandish painting of the 15th century with a strong symbolism. Painters wanted to look modern by making things look real, but they did not want to give up other ways of communicating that they had developed in the past. An important one was associating symbolic meanings with different things. We can see a good example of this in this image. It is a detail of another painting by Van Eyck, made around 1435. Its title is The Virgin of Chancellor Roland. It's in the Louvre Museum in Paris. Behind the hands on the left we see a landscape made up of vineyards. We could think that this was simply there, but always keep in mind that paintings don't reproduce reality. They are ideas that have taken on a visual form. This is obvious, but part of the magic of painting lies in the fact that it is so convincing that we are always fooled by it. Let's go back to the vineyards, which we see again in this detail of the same painting. Art historians have learned that the man who commissioned it, who we see here, earned part of his money from his extensive vineyards in the region of Burgundy. Clearly, this landscape was included in the painting not because it happened to be there, but to remind viewers of the wealth and power of the man placed in front of it. So remember, a new and meticulous attention to detail coexists in Netherlandish painting of the 15th century with disguised symbolism. Before we focus on the achievements of Van Eyck and van der Weyden in the next videos, two concepts need to be explained. One is the term Netherlandish painting that I have been using. The second is the technique of oil painting that was used by painters in the Netherlands. The term Netherlandish painting, or sometimes early Netherlandish painting, is used in the history of art and in museums to refer to artists who worked during the 15th century and the early years of the 16th century in the region then known as the Netherlands. This included the country that we still know by that name, the Netherlands, but it also included an area just to the south that roughly coincides with present-day Belgium, as I have said. In fact, the most populated and important cities were there in the southern Netherlands, and it was there that most of the leading painters worked. So remember, we use the term early Netherlandish painting to refer to pictures made in the 15th century and the early 16th century, primarily in a region that coincides with what is now Belgium, especially in the cities of Bruges, Ghent, Brussels, and Leuven. The second concept that we need to explain is the technique of oil paint. This was used by Netherlandish painters of the 15th century instead of tempera, which was used in Italy. The difference between oil painting and tempera is simple. The pigment, or coloring agent, is mixed with a binding medium that is not egg yolk, as in tempera, but a type of oil that will dry when in contact with the air. The most commonly used was linseed oil. What is special about this is that most pigments, when mixed in oil, become translucent. When applied to a panel or a canvas, they have a characteristic gloss and depth of color very different from tempera, which is opaque. Even though oil paint had been used earlier to supplement other techniques, it was developed and refined during the 15th century by Netherlandish artists, and it was specifically associated by writers with the art of Jan van Eyck, who achieved great fame throughout Europe. The way Netherlandish artists used oil paint was by applying it over an underlying white layer used to prepare the panel support for painting. The effect achieved by this was once explained to me by a restorer. Think of a piece of toast with butter on it. Over this, apply a layer of dark jam. This would be the oil paint. The white underneath seems to glow through the covering layer, creating a luxurious looking surface. When making a painting, very thin layers of paint could be applied over and over, adding to the sense of depth. Aside from the appearance of its surface, a second feature of oil paint that made it different from tempera is that it allowed for a smooth, continuous modeling of volumes. This was because oil dried slowly, as opposed to the fast-drying tempera, and different strokes of varying colors or tones could be blended and used to create smooth transitions. Look at the belly and the legs in this detail on the screen. The volumes look round because the artist can blend darker with lighter tones as he shapes the three-dimensional body. If this were painted with tempera, small strokes of slightly different tones would be painted next to each other and would blend in our eyes only when seen from a distance. By the 16th century, oil had become the predominant technique in all of Europe, but its use evolved, with artists focusing on different properties of the medium, such as its consistence, which allowed them to work up the texture of paintings. Oil paint would never be used again with the meticulous precision of Netherlandish artists.